My name is Father Gregory Pine, and I'm the Assistant Director for Campus Outreach of the Thomistic Institute in Washington, D.C. The Thomistic Institute was founded 11 years ago as a research institute of the Dominican House of Studies, which is where the Dominican friars of the province of St. Joseph, which is in this region of the United States, do their formation, and it's a faculty of theology for students who would like to come and study for an MA or for an STL or for an STD in the pontifical system. The Thomistic Institute began with some collaborative projects with other bodies like Scala, for instance, the Aquinas Institute here at Princeton, to deepen research and investigation within the Catholic intellectual tradition, the Christian intellectual tradition more broadly. And we began by, a series of conferences both in DC and beyond. And then 5 years ago, we began our Campus Chapters program, whereby students can organize on their university campus, some of whom are here. You can chat with Michael De Felice about his efforts at Georgetown. So to bring the Catholic intellectual tradition to bear on campuses throughout the United States and Canada and Ireland and England, and we're just starting in China. So students will have lectures throughout the course of the semester, host reading groups, watch groups, and a variety of other opportunities come their way. So we began with maybe 4 to 6 universities in the first year, and now we're at maybe 55 to 60, and we're delighted to have seen the growth and witnessed the growth. And the thing that's most exciting about it, I suppose, is that the students themselves are the protagonists, and they're very motivated for the intellectual evangelization of their campuses, which proves often very fruitful and inspiring. So there are materials about the Thomistic Institute upstairs as you pass to and from on your way to lunch. And Katie Bryzek, who is the manager of special programs and development, is also here. So we're delighted to chat with you about questions you have about the Thomistic Institute. It's my pleasure to continue by introducing our next speaker, Dr. Craig Stephen Titus, who is a professor at Divine Mercy University. He did his undergraduate work at Arizona State, a master's at the Dominican School of Philosophy and Theology in Oakland, Berkeley, and he finished a PhD, STD, at the University of Freiburg in Switzerland. His research and publications touch subjects ranging from anthropology, practical reason, marriage and family life, and especially the integration of theology and the psychological sciences. The most recent volume that he has produced as co-editor and co-author is entitled Catholic Christian Meta-Model of the Person, Integration with Psychology and Mental Health Practice. That's hot off the press, just now available on Amazon this past week. Monographs include Resilience and the Virtue of Fortitude, Aquinas, and Dialogue with the Psychological Sciences. And also, something that's very dear to me is one of the co-editors of the Pincair's Reader. So one of the last students of the great Servais Pincair is a Belgian Dominican who taught at the University of Freiburg for many years and provided a great service to the philosophical, theological, and psychological community by his many contributions. But as is often the Dominican practice, when somebody does something well, we resent him and neglect him. So St. Dominic died in 1221. We buried him under our feet and thought nothing of him later. It was only after the Franciscans had canonized St. Francis and St. Anthony of Padua that we thought we should do something about this. So it's often to our great appreciation that we rely upon the generosity of others to bring Dominicans and their contributions to light, and he has performed an excellent service in that regard for Servais Pincair, and certainly many of us present here have benefited from his wisdom. So, to speak on Aquinas on the moral development of friendship, love, as a contribution for mental health practice, please join me in welcoming Dr. Craig Stephen Titus.
I was thinking it'd be so much easier if the bottle was left uncapped, so I could just reach down and drink it. So it was a sabotage, unintentional, but thanks a lot. I'd like to warmly thank Dr. Mooney and the Scala Foundation, the Thomistic Institute, and the Aquinas Institute for their very kind invitation to speak with you today. I do thank also Father Gregory especially for the very kind introduction and the mention of the book. In one sense, the book that's just come out, Catholic Christian, Meta-Model of the Person, as I spoke a little bit yesterday for those who were able to join me, does represent an ecumenical Catholic and ecumenical focus on just what difference it makes to have a full vision of the person, a full vision, like St. Augustine would have. but spoken out in various ways for the psychological sciences. So what I'd like to do today is actually speak to the title that Father Gregory mentioned, but also perhaps tweak it at the same time. Because in doing the paper, I actually realized, in writing the paper for you, I realized that empathy was becoming more and more the theme. And so in the dialogue section between Aquinas' understanding of friendship and flourishing, I was originally thinking of including in psychological sciences attachment theory, the theory of forgiveness as a technique in therapy, as well as empathy. But then I realized I don't want to do so much. So what we're going to do is go a little bit deeper into empathy and make some connections with the other important aspects of our embodiedness that are found through the psychosocial sciences related to friendship. So I've kept friendship, I've kept happiness, included more clearly empathy. And as I was saying, the focus will be a dialogue. Aquinas and psychosocial research on friendship, love, and empathy. It is a start, if you will, of a new research project, a continuing research project that's also somewhat new, in which there is this connection between Aquinas' thought, which represents for us today a classic understanding of love, charity, and friendship, along with the psychosocial theory and mental health practice that contribute reflections on the concept, phenomena, and practice of empathy. Of course, love has a large range of considerations, which is wider than friendship and wider than empathy per se. And our focus seeks to enlighten rather than to exhaust the treatment of the development of friendship, love, and empathy. What is empathy? Empathy can be understood as an interpersonal capacity to be receptive to and aware of the experience of another person while communicating this attunement to the other person. Empathy is conceived as cognitive, emotional, and interpersonal phenomena that serve as a basis for strengthened relationships and interactions. It can also be seen as a clinical practice or skill that can bring about healing in psychopathology, healing of psychopathology. This is one of the reasons why I've latched on and gone deeper into empathy, because it is so close to friendship, and in the psychosocial sciences, in the psychotherapeutic applications, we see that empathy is one of the best, most widely empirically validated evidence-based practice, and it leads to healing. So how might this practices, how might an understanding of practices of empathy which lead towards healing give us an insight into friendship? How might friendship at a theological and philosophical level give us an insight into the psychosocial sciences on empathy? And we can go back and forth, seeing that there is at different levels contribution that can be made from the psychosocial sciences and from the theological perspective. And so what I'd like to do is say, is to recognize that there are, within this perspective, perhaps rightfully, the need for some provisos. The first one is that the paper focuses on friendship, love, and it doesn't give full attentiveness to the types of details that we heard about Augustine, or the specifications of courtship, friendships, or spousal friendships, or filial love, or sibling friendships, or neighbor friendships, and even love, charity, and friendships in other vocations, or even the terms like eros or complacency. Our focus is it's tighter, even though it does apply to these other, if you will, manifestations of friendship. Proviso 2. Aquinas is a 13th century Dominican specialist or master in virtue theory. His heavenly interest, who was heavenly, sorry, thank you, Father Gregory. Not because it's, I'm sorry, spilling. And so Aquinas, just a couple words about him, that he does bring with him a type of dialogue his interest in the Christian scriptures, the patristic sources, and Christian tradition, and he brings it into a dialogue, if you will, engaging philosophy in his times and science of his times, as you all might know even better than I. With the current renewal of virtue theory, before and beyond positive psychology's use of virtues, Aquinas has become more widely known than ever, perhaps. And I will call upon him without giving you a full introduction to his thought. His way of asking questions and including diverse dialogue partners makes him a model and mentor for our topic on the development of friendship life. Proviso 3, I'll be using mostly the term flourishing instead of happiness. Happiness was used for the conference title. I prefer flourishing without denying the utility of happiness, which has been used quite often to translate beatitudo and other very rich concepts that go beyond the English happiness, which the word of which is hap, chance, luck. Not really what we're looking for in kind of extended types of flourishing, but nonetheless a good placeholder. And flourishing, I think, well, flourishing is what I would use to talk about this topic, including happiness.
Could you speak a little louder?
I can certainly try. One of the problems of being tall is microphones and podiums don't tend to reach you. But I'll try to reach you. Thank you. Also, Proviso 4 in our talk, I'll be using the term charity. And charity we need to recognize is not the charity of giving to the poor on the street. That is a manifestation of a deeper notion of charity that we call, if you will, a theological virtue. Enough for provisos. This paper is rather focused, and it focuses on 3 questions. You have them on the handout. First, how does Aquinas understand charity, divine love, as friendship with God, in terms of mutual benevolence, and sharing with another's own good, or sharing in one's flourishing? Secondly, how does the natural love of other people, a natural law of friendship love, employ associated skills to grow in knowledge and love of another person? Thirdly, how might empathy and other phenomena and mental health practices serve in promoting the development of the flourishing of friends? And so these 3 questions deal with the theology, the philosophical anthropology, and the psychosocial sciences. First of all, how does Aquinas' understanding of charity as friendship with God in terms of mutual benevolence and sharing one's own good and flourishing with another person, how does he do that? Aquinas' thought offers a large, if you will, and deep context for discussions of love, friendship, and flourishing. In his Summa Theologica, his summary of theology, what we have is an exhaustive, after his exhaustive, if you will, rather extensive treatment of God and creation and of anthropology, human anthropology, Aquinas addresses the human capacities to love God, neighbor, and self. And these capacities are developed through virtues, which we call, habits which we call virtues. Aquinas starts his in-depth treatment of the virtues and his treatment of the virtues with the theological virtues. He treats faith, hope, and love first. Very interesting. Anthropology is laid down, vision of God is laid down, and then when he starts treating the virtues, what does he do first? Well, he treats faith, hope, and love first in that order. And what that does is gives us reason to recognize how he is laying out a very Pauline notion following Corinthians, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and he lays out his understanding of the human person by nature and by grace, by knowledge and by love, with a metaphysical and an anthropological basis for his theological reflections on the greatest of those virtues, which is love. What is friendship charity for Aquinas? For Aquinas, the most perfect charity requires self-gift, the gift of one's own life. It draws on the Gospel of John's chapter 15-13 insight on words of Jesus. Quote, "Greater love has no one than this, that one lay down one's life for one's friends." End quote. One lays down one's his life for his friend. Sometimes we look for Aquinas, where is he talking about self-gift? This is where he finds, of course, this notion of Jesus giving his life for his friends. And Aquinas summarizes this John 9 teaching by affirming that charity is divine love. Charity is friendship. For Aquinas, that's the first, that's the starting point, that's the bedrock. And for him, the moral life is so concrete that his first definition of the virtue of charity is not academic, but interpersonal. It is, and we are, if you will, set face to face with a friend. And Aquinas recognizes in his treatment of the Passion and Crucifixion, his treatment throughout his theology of love, that Christ is the model of charity. He gives his very life for the good, the flourishing of his friends. Now, following Aquinas' lead and assuming this larger context, I start by addressing the moral and theological significance of the friend or friendship or friendliness in the thought of Aquinas on love and flourishing. Friendship is a type of love that varies according to its object. A very important point here solves some of the issues related to misunderstandings about who's loved and how we love God and neighbor. There are significant differences when God is the object of love and when it is our neighbor or spouse or child or parent or even a stranger unknown to us in very different ways. In general, friendship love is the interpersonal actualization of this flourishing life of friends. For Aquinas, it is the ability to be God's friend rather than his slave. This is the basic, this is the nature, this is the bedrock for his development of psychology, or what is theological charity. That there's a natural foundation, and it is the foundation of the potentiality to be a friend, not a slave. That's the natural ground, or potential that is elevated by grace and charity and the infused in spiritual virtues. Friendship is this natural good that human reason, supported and made possible by God's help, this auxilia Dei that underlies all of creation. It shapes, it is this natural good of reason that shapes for human life projects in the way that we can understand how love is manifest, a natural love. Friendship is also an infused good that divine reason and love shapes and perfects for divine projects through grace. It is in the mode of salvation that we see the full elevated reality of this friendship with God, as this friendship with God. Now there are several major characteristics of this friendship love for Aquinas, and I'd like to regroup together Aquinas' insights into two large areas. The first one being that that love involves, if you will, the mutual well-wishing between friends. Benevolence is classic. We understand the classic notion of benevolence in love. But for Aquinas, it's not just benevolence, it's mutual benevolence that is recognized by another. And each of those steps, in a sense, makes it more and more complete, more and more dynamic. That is, for us, something that tells us about this friendship love with God. But it's not only benevolence, but it involves also the communication of and sharing in the goodness of the friend. Communication of, not just verbally, but this way that only God can share the good of his own being with another. And so we have benevolence and this communicatio of goods. There are two ways of regrouping Aquinas' understanding of friendship love and all its different manifestations of theological love. That then is played out at the natural level as well, including in the understanding of empathy, I would say. The good of, the giving of goods, this aspect of self-gift for Aquinas, the second aspect of charity love, involves this communication of the gift of self to the friend. And it is, for Aquinas, the model of friendship. In his theological reflections, he identifies that the preeminent self-giving friend is Christ. Who is the friend that gives himself? Who is the model? Who is the exemplar? It is Christ who gives his life as a good to be shared with his friends. In sharing such goods, he becomes the model for all virtues. Quote, of obedience, humility, constancy, justice, and the other virtues displayed in passion, which are requisite for salvation. End of Aquinas, of course. We would begin here with theological considerations. We have begun with these theological considerations of love, even though since grace perfects nature, there are reasons for addressing nature and the nature of emotional love and volitional love before grace. Nonetheless, a theological approach evokes the ultimate end of love, friendship, and flourishing. And a theological start allows us to identify that charity love's object is God primarily, and its secondary object is other people and self. The way that this gets played out for Aquinas, of course, is that the two levels of object, one primary, one transcendent, and the other natural, one sense, relate to each other as source to fulfillment and don't conflict, but rather in very complex description, complement and serve each other. It also helps us to identify the need for an account of the infused virtues, that is, an account of how charity is the basis for much needed infused moral virtues. Natural virtues, justice, and courage, and temperance are perfected, in various ways lifted up by the life of grace, by God's working through His love for men and women. And these infused virtues, the way that God infuses that a dynamic that changes the way that we are just and the way that we're temperate, involves, if you will, principally moving us and contextualizing us in a life that seeks salvation. The infused virtues are about salvation. The natural virtues are about living our lives with others in ways no less that are flourishing. We're not a type of flourishing that satisfies. There's always going to be something more that's answered in infused virtues. In a sentimentalist type of culture, love doesn't always have the meaning discussed above. To understand the breadth of love and friendship in Aquinas' philosophical psychology or philosophy of nature, for the faculty of the soul, we need to present four basic characteristics of the body's unity: the sensory perception and intellect, the emotion and the volition, in terms of love, in order to understand the larger picture of love for Aquinas. In order to flourish, natural love aims to be united to good, by emotion, by desire, by the very way that we move forward and are attracted to the good, by sensory appetite or affect, and by will, not only emotion, but by will and volition, intellectual affect and appetite. Now, natural love can't be explained by itself. This is my own point in this natural section. It needs to be explained in terms of the type of knowledge that precedes it. We don't love what we don't know. And the knowing that underlies emotion and will is the sensory perceptual cognitions, which are so important for understanding empathy. And reason, which helps us to see the big picture. Aquinas' approach distinguishes charity from love in various ways. He designates the natural basis of charity by this term, love, translated as love, by recognizing the will's natural capacity for love. And in so doing, he distinguishes charity from other types of love and involves the will. What makes the difference is the involvement not just of emotion, but of will. For there is the volitional love of benevolence and self-giving that underlies virtues such as justice and courage and temperance and patience and perseverance, and all of them are enlivened because of the capacity not just to allow to be emotive, to be attractive, and to be groomed, if you will, ethically and virtuously, but to recognize there is by the will and by the intellect, the raising up and the perfecting that is only possible when we see anthropologically the capacities of knowing and loving, not just at intellectual levels, but the knowing and loving at the embodied levels of sense and perception and emotion. Now, what is friendship love? Friendship love, in the midst of establishing a theological foundation and authority about friendship love based on the Gospel of John, as we saw, Aquinas turns also to the philosophical authority, establishes the theological authority. John sets the tone. The philosophical authority is Aristotle, and he presents, if you will, another reality, another aspect, another fuller aspect of the person, the capacity for love, friendship love in particular. He identifies classically, though not going into it too much, but it's important to mark out. But Aristotle's understanding of friendship has this threefold analysis where there's the friendship of pleasure. It dies as soon as pleasure dies. There's the friendship of utility. It will stop also when the usefulness of the friendship is over. And there's this friendship, if you will, of virtue, of the good life shared together. That is the heart of understanding, where it is the lasting element. And Aristotle says that perfect friendship, that lasting element of friendship, is the friendship of people who are good and like virtue. And for these, wish well alike, is the quote, to each other as good, and they are good in themselves. End of quote. It is through a distinction of nature and grace. Is it? You can't hear? Okay, so what I'll do is I will speak up. I appreciate that. I know that my voice doesn't carry well. And so what I'd like to do is just identify within Aristotle's understanding that we have also a foundational element that Aquinas picks up, and it's this, the reality that perfect friends involve a common life, of virtue, of wishing well of each other, and if you will, the participation in their love, a type of love. It's through a distinction of nature and grace that Aquinas gives reason to further distinguish by grace the natural friendship love from friendship charity. And this is something just as a convention to understand what's happening in Aquinas' thought. He recognizes three things: the natural emotion of love, the richer will-empowered friendship love, and the charity-empowered friendship charity. So I'm going to say love as emotion, love. Friendship love as that will love that involves a friendship that engages the goodness, desiring the goodness for the other. And then the charity friendship, or the friendship charity that we saw from. And it's in this understanding that Aquinas can account for various types and levels of knowing love. And it's a philosophical project that he makes, and I think it's very helpful for us to understand the place of friendship at these different levels, and the way that friendship can be drawn, if you will, forward in contacts with other people. In one sense, what I'd like to do is maybe not go too much further into the anthropology that has been set out largely from Aquinas, in order to focus more on the side of empathy, and how empathy might feed us in some way to understand more profoundly the reality of friendship love. The another distinction is this distinction between natural loves, friendship love, or love of desire, this love of emotion, can be understood to give us something of the natural underlying reality that is the nature on which grace transforms the life of the person. God doesn't, in Aquinas' mindset, transform the person like an angel. He does, to talk about the way that grace, the nature is perfected by grace according to the mode of nature. This is what It's by the mode of nature. It's not by the mode that is foreign to capacities that are already built into the very nature of the person as created God's image and likeness. There's the fall, but at the same time there is the capacity to be raised up. The grace perfects nature according to human nature. And so the normative and the metaphysical reality of grace working through nature is an important part of understanding, in one sense, how a dialogue with the psychological sciences can say anything philosophically significant for friendship, love, and friendship charity. So the third part now, I'd like to enter into the discussion of empathy and how empathy and other mental health practices can serve in promoting, in one sense, the development of friendship and the development of flourishing. So let's focus for a moment on the nature, phenomena, and practices of empathy in interpersonal relationships, drawing on mental health studies. And it's in that context we're going to come back to Aquinas and see how these kinds of insights into nature, and when we're talking about the psychosocial understanding of the person, we're talking about the nature of the person. So once we have some insight from empathy studies, the question would be, how does that relate then to the classic tradition, the classic tradition as being represented by Aquinas concerning the way that we can understand friendship. So let's talk about empathy. There are many different definitions of empathy. And the concept of empathy is being used in different fields in evolutionary psychology, in neurosciences, in psychotherapy, in arts, art appreciation, and in ethics. And it's being used to explore the interpersonal and emotive experiences that we have. For our purposes here, we will note certain characteristics induced, drawn from the definitions, observations, and practices of empathy in the psychosocial field, focusing on certain aspects of love to contextualize and conceptualize, if you will, curative practices related to empathy. First, a little history. In 1909, it was Kitzler that translated the term empathy from einfühlen, in feeling, or to suffer, in his lectures on the experimental psychological thought processes. However, it was in the 30s and 40s, the late 30s and 40s, that Carl Rogers popularized more the concept of practice of empathy in his person-centered psychotherapy. Also in psychology in 1949, Diamond defined empathy as the quote, the imaginative transposing of oneself into the thinking, feeling, and acting of another, and so structuring the world as he does. End of quote. Other representatives of the wide-ranging literature on empathy ask questions such as, is empathy an attitude or behavior? Is it a felt knowledge of another person's emotional experience, or is empathy an interpretive process of understanding the mind? Terms that are used synonymously in the study of empathy include unconditional acceptance, sympathy, compassion, fellow feeling, prosocial emotions, altruism, and insight, which in one sense show a diversity of understanding and a reason why we need to be careful about interpreting in our interpretations of studies of empathy. The neurosciences also have identified the neural correlates of empathy, which are fascinating, and understood as the capacity to experience neurologically someone else's pain or joy without physical pain is proper to the self, but only because of the perceived pain of another, one's neural circuits of pain are activated. This is the basis for understanding something more of the relationship, the first relationships, the first types of contacts that friends might make. Empathy is that, in the neuroscience perspective, empathy is the internal neural mirroring of the other person's experience. And through empathy, one is influenced cognitively and effectively by the example of the other person who can serve as a mentor or exemplar. So it's explaining some of the foundational elements of ethics, of the vision of the person. And these neuroscience indicators are extremely interesting. And so the opening of empathy, that one more easily enters into alliances and interpersonal relationships. In short, empathy empowers attachments, according to the neuroscientists. Researchers have shown that mere neurons underlie such sharing of emotions, and including the sharing of soothing emotions in the face of fear, anger, and so on. From an evolutionary perspective, now just insight, empathy is conceived as useful for humans, since to know each other's pain, suffering, and needs leads to the survival of the species. It leads also to the extension of mutual aid, and it leads to the reduction of stress. Interesting. Insights from psychological, evolutionary psychology. These are, of course, insights into, at a theoretical level, the utility for the ways of empathy. Furthermore, it's common to distinguish three types of empathy, and they involve the emotive, the cognitive, and the behavioral. The emotive empathy is, in emotive empathy, one feels the other person's emotions, the other person's feeling, and about the self and about others. And that is at another level than the cognitive empathy, that where one perceives another person's mind or soul, thoughts about the self, thoughts about the And emotive, cognitive, third, behavioral empathy is one that motivates one to act. Sometimes empathy that is motivated to act is the one you're seeing as empathy, the one that enters into the experience of the other, but the one that steps in and pulls someone out of their experience. And so a nuance is given sometimes in terms of the behavioral empathy to be or sympathy or compassion in an active form. Such behavioral empathy offers attention and care, and also forms types of alliances, bonds, and friendships. At these three levels, we can emphasize, for instance, we can empathize, for example, with the person who's suffering because they've lost a spouse. There can be empathy at these different levels, the feeling, the knowing, the doing. Or likewise, we can empathize with the joy that a person experiences because they've been married and they have a child. This experience, the studies have shown that in expressing these types of empathy, the giver of empathy and the receiver of empathy may experience an opportunity to enrich interpersonal relationship. And this experience can aid the formation of strengthening of a psychotherapeutic alliance. The gift of empathy, the person who gives their attention, its openness, extends to the neighbor, not only extended to the neighbor, may also open the possibility to develop friendship among neighbors. Empirical studies have shown that there are these three aspects, the three modalities of empathy. The therapeutic, or the gift empathy, one that is attentive to the other. And it's at this level where we find the empirical study indicating that there is, in clinical contexts, a type of therapist empathy, quote, that is a moderately strong predictor of therapeutic outcome, end of quote. This is one of the reasons I was saying why I need to go deeper into empathy to recognize how the philosophical understanding of friendship might be operated in terms of psychotherapeutic. The psychotherapeutic having this reality of being curative and this tenacity in studying what is thought to be curative. I found across the different modalities of psychotherapeutic use, cognitive behavioral therapy, object relations, emotion-focused therapy, and the like, various evidence-based practices of empathy have shown to be predictors of healing, moderately strong factor in healing. Studies have also shown, on the contrary, that uncompassionate care and a lack of therapist empathy results in patients who are dissatisfied with treatment and who have worse outcomes because they do not comply with treatment. And so, around maybe just identifying some of the across the board, the important aspects of empathy, like we can list that with a certain focus on the psychotherapeutic, that there is empathy that empathy allows us to perceive another's emotions. Of course, empathy can serve as an emotional bridge between people, not just feeling emotion of the other, but there's the bridging that happens when the other perceives you're being perceived, perceives you're being experienced, perceive that you're being understood. Thirdly, it can lead to helping in pro-social behavior between persons in need. It moves to action. You're taken out of yourself with empathy, and then there are other steps. It can lead to action. Empathy can lead to new relationships, including the therapeutic relationship, which is formed in large part by the empathetic attention to the other. Empathy can lead not just to the therapeutic relationship, but it can promote different types of attachment. It's in that context that we can say that empathy also can lead then not just to psychotherapeutic relationships, but to friendships. It is the foundation that leads towards the development of friendships. Empathetic medical care has more positive outcomes also, such as improved patient experiences, quote, adherence to treatment recommendations, better clinical outcomes, fewer medical errors, and malpractice claims, interesting for the therapists and the clinicians and the physicists and the physicians, and actually also higher physician retention. Empathetic psychotherapy can lead to the healing of psychopathology, as I mentioned, and as much as it is in a state of evidence-based practices that have identified the reality of empathy. So in the midst of this mini study of empathy, the question then is, how do we take into consideration our first, if you will, overview of the theological and the philosophical sources about the development of friendship, and this, if you will, positive and pro-social outcomes from empathy. And so the questions that will lead us to the conclusion involves what is the origin of empathy's efficacy? Why do you think? How can we understand there to be positive results out of the experience of empathy? And might these findings and related insights be extended to non-clinical experiences of empathy? And so, as I might have mentioned at the beginning, I work with clinicians, I work with psychotherapists, I'm a philosopher, theologian, that lays down since in anthropology, that goes back and forth and involves a type of dialogue. And this is the example of the type of dialogue. This mini study helps us, if you will, of empathy, helps us to have a foundation for considerations of the dynamic of empathy. One of my basic theses about empathy and friendship love is that empathy is a receptive aspect of love. So in one sense, when we're looking into the dynamic of empathy, the first psychotherapeutic interest is at that level that there's the openness to the other. The openness to the other, that is, in one sense, an openness to the person, the other, as being expressed by their emotions, as being expressed by their thoughts, as being seen within their actions. And if it is a first receptivity to that level of love, attraction towards the good, then we can understand something more that helps us, if you will, be open to relationships of love. And it involves, if you will, first cognitive aspect of love. The emotion is rooted in a knowing. The knowing is prior to, if you will, the emotion. And Aquinas' anthropology helps us, if you will, to take into consideration empathy that is not simply an openness to love, but also the first step of some kind of movement, attraction towards the other as good. Now, within the philosophical anthropology of Aquinas, we see the whole range of the sensory perceptions. And we have the sensory perceptual cognitive aspect that of the person that allows us to understand sometimes that philosophically we set aside. We focus on reason and will, and we don't focus on the embodied. Empathy helps us to understand something of that, but Aquinas allows us to understand something of it. And in one sense pushes us back into the experience of empathy, recognizing that there must be at the very beginning of the experience of empathy some kind of attraction, repulsion, and Aquinas speaks about this in terms of the evaluative sense. In one sense, when we're looking at the insights into empathy, we're seeing an evaluative sense operative within the person. I'm trying to point to a feeling, I'm trying to point to a center point. Where we experience the other as dangerous, we experience the other as safe, we experience the other as a possible friend. Clinical indications are that this is what empathy is about. But also philosophically speaking, this is what we understand to be the basis of an embodied aspect of knowing that we call, that in psychological terms we can talk about in terms of perception, and in philosophical terms we can talk about in types of memory, imagination, and the evaluative sense. And so another basic tenet that I've been working on here is to try to understand that empathy is curative and why it is. And I think it is curative in as much as it expresses a dimension of true friendship. The philosophical tradition identifies there's this first pre-emotional type of reality in the midst of an encounter. The person, in one sense, existentially is understood and felt. And that is very common in animals at an instinctual level. But also it's at the heart of a human experience. In various ways, it's not simply animal-like because it is taken up in the what happens afterwards and how we live what is being perceived. And what happens afterwards and what we're living and how we perceive, how we understand what we're experiencing, I think is curative because it is actually something that we're deeply structured to do. We're deeply structured to connect with the other people, another person, but it doesn't happen by itself. Your studies on empathy help us to understand something of the dynamic of a therapeutic gift empathy compared to the reception type of empathy. And that explains on a very deep level of how God has structured us with inclinations and capacities that allow us then to complete our vocations by extending not just perception purely as being tending towards friendliness, but there being then the emotional life that is taken into consideration within the context of one's vocation. One is mother, one is father, one is wife, one is husband. One is called in various ways to love. And so the basic attraction towards the other, or repulsion from the other, involves the ways that afterwards we have to shape our lives. Our life is shaped in the Confessions of Augustine in a very floral, very powerfully insightful way. But anthropologically underneath it, we can understand that something that's happening there is that the goodwill, Aquinas' understanding of the person in love, the love of God, involves something that is perfected in the person. There's a perfecting, transforming of something that is deep within us. We're attracted to these natural inclinations of being attracted to the good of the other and being friendly allows us then further steps that involve a development of virtue. development of the virtue of friendship, which takes, if you will, the whole way that empathy is manifesting certain aspects of this pro-friendly, pro-therapeutic union, pro-life in common perspective. And it involves also communication of goods, because we see within empathy, in the curative aspect, when the therapist actually then succeeds in being with and for and listening to the other, and the relationship is formed, and the therapeutic alliance is shaped, we have then, it's another step for healing. It doesn't then end the work of empathy, but it's a process that moves forward. One question in this kind of affirmation of the importance of empathy in psychotherapeutic is, and the whole question of friendship is, it certainly involves what are the roles of friends, and how can, in understanding them completely, the neurophysiological and the deeply anthropological aspects of friendly types of empathy, how do they serve then in forming friendships, in forming not just psychological, not just therapeutic alliances, but also friendships that are significant for our lives. In conclusion, I have chosen to bring into dialogue the nature, phenomena, and practice of empathy because empathy is one of several foundations that seem to prepare for and aid in forming of relationships. It is a gateway to friendship without being friendship properly speaking. It might be said to be an associated skill or a psychological functional equivalent to an associated virtue related to friendship and charity as well as justice. We've discussed the several types of love and charity, and I would suggest that the theological gift of charity as friendship with God invites an investigation of the nature that underlies the grace nature of charity. Aquinas identifies two qualities of friendship and charity, recognized mutual benevolence and communication of goods or flourishing, self-gift. They go together. Natural friendship love, too, requires benevolence and communication of self. And the other associated virtues and functional mental health capacities that bolster friendship love needed as well. Insights that complete Aquinas' insights are the mental health, are that the mental health practices such as gift, empathy, attachment, forgiveness, and friendliness will give us even more insights into the nature of these deep, if you will, roots and inclinations towards friendship. The theological and anthropological insights of Aquinas, last word, makes friends and friendship central to understanding everyday flourishing and transcendent life. Empirical research and mental health considerations enrich this theological and philosophical understanding with their insights on empathy. From both sides, there are contributions. The theological dimension identifies the ends of flourishing in friendship, practices for benevolence and self-giving in accord with the nature of the person. Not just anything passes as benevolence or self-communication of good. Aquinas' normative understanding of the person in flourishing provide metaphysical and ethical ends and means to pursue the good and the particular goods of different friends. Secondly, the psychosocial dimension of our discussion recognizes that empathy serves as a transformative practice, an applied or associated type of virtue, we could say, that underlies friendship and other pro-social virtues. And finally, it is our suggestion that we need to attend to both the acquired, natural, and theological grace levels of friendship for a wider understanding of the potential of interpersonal flourishing and the study and practice of empathy in terms of offering a window into the foundational sensory cognitive curative dimension of